Good morning, participants, members of the audience, and the organizers. Our first thank must go to the Nigerian Working Group who organized this and their various contacts, including the congressman who will also be with us. The Nigerian Working Group comprises a number of civil society organizations based in Washington, D.C., with members in other places. And they work on Nigeria in various capacities, humanitarian projects in which they assist the needy, peace building in which they contribute to a peaceful society and make suggestions on how to bring about peace, human rights in which they monitor developments that are against people, advice to governance organizations, linkages with scholars, and linkages with think tanks. In recent years, the Nigerian Working Group has contributed effectively in looking for peace in the Northeast, looking for peace in the Middle Belt regions of Nigeria, in areas of religious conflicts, farmer-herders conflicts, and they've given, with limited resources at their disposal, access and humanitarian assistance. They've sought and pushed ideas on accountability, responses to crisis, as in the case of the Boko Haram, and they've done additional work in relations to elections and the recent EndSars movement. We cannot thank them enough, and I urge all of us to identify with their mission, which is about the transformation of one of the most important countries in the world. Thank you. To address you today is a cast of talented speakers drawn from the civil society organization, from the academy, from the media, representing youth and people of an older generation. It's a great mix. And your moderator is my humble self, Tony Falola. I write basically on Nigeria, and I've been a professor for close to 45 years. I'm currently based at the University of Texas at Austin, where I've been teaching for 30 years. Welcome to the program. Thank you very much for joining us. I now want to ask Congressman Al-Green to give us his opening remark. Welcome, Al. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very kind words, and thank you for the work of the working group. I greatly appreciate what you've been able to achieve and look forward to seeing even greater things achieved. I think that in this unity, we will have the kind of progress that we need to help Nigerians receive the justice and the accountability for the human rights violations that have been committed. As you know, we submitted a resolution that was filed in Congress, and the resolution bears the representation of other members of Congress, including Mr. Castro of Texas. He and I are joint original co-sponsors of the resolution, but it also has many others. And I think that it's important to know who signed on as original co-sponsors of this resolution, because it says to you, these are persons that you should express some gratitude toward, and you might want to try to get other persons involved. Mr. Castro, I've mentioned, Mr. Raskin, Ms. Lee of California, Ms. Bass, who's a former chairperson of the Congressional Black Caucus, Ms. Jayapal, Mr. Cohen, Mr. McGovern, Ms. Watson-Coleman, Mr. Grijalva, Ms. Presley, Ms. Fudge, Mr. Danny Davis of Illinois, Mr. Schiff. These are some of the persons. And of course, the Foreign Affairs Committee itself has received the resolution very warmly. And we now have Mr. Gregory Meeks, who is the chairperson of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and he is sensitive to these issues. We will be submitting the resolution again. We are making some minor tweaks, minor edits to it. You should have a copy of it, and I would beg that you peruse it to make sure that it meets with your approval. That's all. I am working with you and desire to have your input to make sure that we're all on the same page all of the time. I will entertain some questions and let you know that I'm in Houston, Texas, where we have power outages. The water has to be boiled. We have received an indication from a prison that they need help in getting water. I have a senior citizens home that is without power and water. I have real-time emergencies that I'm dealing with is the point that I'm making. And my visit with you will have to be somewhat terse only because of these real-time emergencies. So I welcome questions that you might have now with the understanding that I will ask for leave momentarily. So Mr. Chairman, thank you again, and I welcome questions.
Questions from members of the audience?
Hello.
Yes. Yes, please.
Would you identify yourself and ask your question, please?
Oh. We can't, we've lost him.
Mr. Falala, I have a question.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nekman Osman Wilson. I am recently returned to Texas after being a native of Houston and currently transitioning from New York City. I came this weekend to a very stark situation in Texas, and I know that there's some parallels here around energy management that we're observing in Texas this weekend and some of the experiences of those of us who grew up in Nigeria. So I just have a question for the Congress member about energy management and Texas's plan for the future, any parallels that you've learned, and also any congressional ordinances in progress to support Nigeria with energy management.
Well, first, let me express my condolences for your return to Texas at this time. You picked a fine time to return, but we're glad to have you back. I'm not sure that I totally understood the question that you have with reference to energy management, but I'll give you some comments on energy management. I'm on a letter wherein we're asking questions and making an inquiry. I think that we still have to have some more facts before we can come to final conclusions. And I do know that where you have few facts, you have much speculation. And there is speculation about who's responsible and who ought to resign. I'm still collecting facts. I have not concluded that a specific person should resign or a specific entity is responsible. The lady who spoke mentioned something, and it was very prudently said, energy management is a problem. In Texas, we have what I will call a middle entity, similar to the term middleman, middle person. And that entity is responsible for managing the flow of energy. And when there is a shortage of energy, that entity is responsible for telling the providers that they must diminish the usage. And to do this, they can literally have what are called blackouts. And they don't tell the providers of the energy where to initiate a blackout. They tell them that certain percentage of your users should be blacked out. And that's what's happening. Ordinarily, you wouldn't have a whole state in this crisis, because if you don't have the whole state, you can move energy from one part of the state to another part to maintain power for everybody. But we have the whole state. And ordinarily, if you have a state problem, you can go to your region and get some assistance from other providers in the region. Well, the whole region is having a problem with energy. Ordinarily, if your region and your state are in needs and you're having a problem, you can go internationally to Mexico. Well, Mexico needs their energy. So there's a lot happening, many moving parts. I'm still at a point where I'd like to get all of the facts before I draw my conclusions. And I will draw conclusions, but I prefer not to draw my conclusions currently. And ma'am, I hope that helps you to some extent. I believe that there is much more to be said. I'm just not in a position, in my opinion, to say it right now. And thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you for the response. I look forward to that summary of your conclusions and the investigation. We appreciate it.
Thank you. If we have another person who identify yourself, give your name and ask your question, please.
Yes, please. My name is Deji Adeyanju. I'm the convener of Concerned Nigerians, a pro-democracy and human rights pressure group here in Nigeria. I've been privileged to be arrested several times for defending human rights. I think I've lost count, because at the last count, 9, and I've also been sent to jail a couple of times here. The question I have for the congressman, first, let me appreciate the efforts of the congressman and other like minds in Congress. And the question I have is that we have been on issues of human rights violations here in Nigeria over the years. And the rhetorics are never ending. And as far as issues of human rights are concerned, you know, those who are in power here, they are rarely accountable. And for instance, we wrote a petition just recently to the International Criminal Court calling for, you know, the investigation and possible prosecution of the immediate past service chiefs, especially Lieutenant Colonel Tuku Buratai, who just retired, who supervised the killing of hundreds of Shiite Muslims in Zaria, in Kaduna State, and also supervised killing of IPOP protesters, that's members of the indigenous people of Africa, and also EndSars protesters, and in several rallies we have done here, especially with the Shiite community. You know, I have witnessed firsthand people have been shot close to me while we're protesting. And this particular former chief of army staff, you know, notoriously boasted on television programs that nothing is going to happen. Aside that, we have also written several embassies, including the US Embassy, and we have also had many communications with many members of the Department of State, and we have always been agitating for visa restrictions, not just for the perpetrators of human rights abuses here in the country, but also members of their families. So what can Congress do? Because the only thing that our politicians here fear the most are visa ban, visa restrictions, freezing of assets, because majority of their children, they school abroad because the schools here are not good. And they go to hospitals in the US, you know, and all this. And so what can Congress do that people begin to realize that there's consequences for bad behavior? And we have a long list of those who continue to assault our constitutional democracy, who continue to violate human rights. Just a week ago, protesters at the Lekki toll gate were harassed, beaten, you know, for no just cause. So I am a victim, I'm a witness. In fact, the cases are too numerous. So my question would just be, what can Congress do in this regard? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And let me express my concern and my heartfelt condolences and sympathies for persons who are suffering. I wish I could do more. And I think there are a good many members of Congress who would like to do more. So let me just share a couple of thoughts with you. The first is something that you're very much aware of, but I think it merits my saying it. We're dealing with a sovereign country. Nigeria is not a subject of the United States. And as a sovereign country, we do have things that we can do. Some of them are at extremes that probably won't happen. And I'll let you in your mind understand what an extreme is. That probably won't happen, but there are extremes. There are other things that can happen, and you mentioned assets being frozen. These are functions of the executive branch of the government. Congress does not execute the laws in the United States. The executive branch executes laws. My hope is, as we go through this process, that we understand that people of goodwill will do the best that they can to be of assistance. And sometimes, even with the best of intentions, we don't get all done that we'd like to get done. And over the years, I'm 73 years old, 73. I've seen what happens in movements where people start to feed on each other when they assume that people have more power than they actually have. I hope that we won't find ourselves falling into this abyss. It won't be helpful. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to encourage others to do the best that they can. But the thing that happens too often is we look for someone who ought to be responsible outside of those who are actually responsible, meaning someone who should make a difference who's not making the difference. I don't want to see this happen to us, dear friends, and I'm making an appeal to you now to understand that I'll do the very best that I can. And sometimes my very best is not good enough, but you will get my very best. And I will make all of the appeals and do as much as I can, and hope that this working group will continue to work together, understanding that even in your ranks, there's only so much you're going to be able to do. I'm not saying that we ever give up, we never give out, we never give in, but we just don't turn on each other. I see this as a need to be said now because I'm 73 years old. I've been to jail many times myself. John Lewis and I were locked up together twice. So I've been to jail too. And I understand what we're dealing with, and I'm going to do the best that I can. And with that said, I mentioned to you that I have some real-time emergencies that I'm contending with right now. So I have to lend some of my time to these real-time emergencies. And we'll look forward to filing the resolution and hopefully getting more persons to sign on. So my request of you is call as many members as you can, contact their offices. We'll let you know what the resolution number is once we file it. Tenzin is on the phone with me. She's handling this in the office. She's my legislative director. She's a key part of my staff. She's on the phone. And get as many members as you can to sign on. We'll do as much as we can with it once we have it. And that would include getting it to the Foreign Affairs Committee. Hopefully at some point there will be a hearing and it will be considered. Hopefully at some point we'll try to get it before the House for a vote. These are the things that we'll try to do and hopefully we'll get done. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak. And if you have any final comment that you'd like to share with me before I exit, I'm honored to hear it.
Thank you so much, Congressman Al-Green. I live in the state of Texas and know what you're dealing with. We cannot thank you enough for being proactive, for protecting the lives of people, and for being part of the solution to this emergency. We, on behalf of other speakers and the audience, we thank you. We will let you go. We appreciate the importance of what you do, and we must recognize the fact that you are not leaving us because you are not enjoying the program, but because there are emergencies that you have to deal with. Thank you very much and have a good morning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, everyone who's listening. I'll just leave you with the words of C.A. Tinley. I like quoting him, harder yet may be the fight. Right may often yield to might. Wickedness high may seem to reign, and Satan's cause may seem to gain. But there's a God that rules above with a hand of power and a heart of love. And when we are right, this God will help us fight. Harder yet may be the fight, my dear brothers and sisters. I bid you farewell.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, let's move to various conversations by our talented cast of speakers and members of the audience. You have to forgive us for the brevity because we've given them only 5 minutes each. We sincerely apologize. If there is time during questions and answer time, whatever is bothering your mind that they have not covered, do please say so. On this note, it's my pleasure to invite our good friend and colleague, the Executive Director of Global Rights, Abiodun Bayewu. Excuse me if I didn't pronounce your name very well. Some people call it Bayewu. He will introduce himself and he will speak to the issue of freedom of expression and civic space. Please, you're welcome, sir.
He, her. Good evening, Prof, and thank you very much. You actually pronounced my name perfectly. My name is Abiodun Bayewu, and I'm the Executive Director at Global Rights. I'm going to make this as fast as possible because my colleagues need to get on immediately. 22 years ago, or nearly 22 years ago, there were very high hopes that Nigeria in its democratic form will set the pace for the rest of Africa on issues of participatory governance, on accountability and freedom of speech and human rights respect on the continent. Almost 22 years later, this is not so. As we have seen in through the EndSars movement that at least reverberated across the world, that Nigeria's democracy is in a stranglehold. Its freedom of speech and civic space are rapidly shrinking and have been gagged. Because I need to move really fast, I'll just speak to specific points. On freedom of speech, first speaking to what has happened with Nigeria's media in the past year, just in the year 2020. Now, between January and October 2020, Article 19 documented 51 incidents of arrest, assault, and persecutions on the media. What happened? 3 journalists were killed by security forces, 1 during a protest in Abuja, and 2 by unknown persons. 1 has been missing for several years, believed to have been picked up by security agents. 32 were victims of assault in just a single year. 18 were assaulted for covering the EndSars protest in October 2020. 12 journalists were arrested. 6 were released after a few days, but 6 were charged to court under terrorism or cybercrime, or the Cybercrime Act. 3 media outfits were attacked. 4 media outlets were fined by the government for covering the EndSars protest, particularly in Lagos. In February 2021, slipping into this year, the online newspaper, the People's Gazette, was blocked by telecoms company in what is believed to be a test run of the social media bill that the government is still very intent on passing. In 2020, Nigeria ranked 115 out of 180 in the data of press freedom ranking across the world. Well, you might say that we've climbed up 5 steps from 2019, when we were 120 and 180, the indicators are getting much worse across the country. Now, it's not just about the media. The entire country is on its knees with the government that is bent on repressing the civic space, shutting down dissent, and gagging the media. Just before the EndSars meltdown on the 20th of October 2020, the Nigeria Broadcasting Commission released a set of guidelines. Specifically, they said that media stations have a duty to promote the corporate existence of Nigeria and should not embarrass individuals, organizations, government, or cause disaffection, incite to panic or rift in the society at large. Now, 4 media stations were thereafter fined for that because they embarrassed the government of Nigeria by covering what exactly had happened. Now, civil society is also being subject to a lot of intimidation, threats, arrests, and then we've had the brutalization of protesters, whether in physical or online. We've had the freezing of accounts of people who supported the EndSars movement, travel bans on people who are perceived to be leaders of the EndSars movement. And while everyone debates how many people were killed exactly in Lagos at Lekki Toll Gate, we know that at least 126 people were killed during the EndSars protests across the country, mainly by security agents in Nigeria. And it's not just the government. The government is doing very badly with its laws and with its courts and with its repression, but then that we also have citizens in this country who work with the government to gag free speech and the civic space. For example, in Kano State, 2 cases of politically induced blasphemy charges were leveled against a musician, Yahya Yusuf Aminu, who had released a song on WhatsApp, which was considered blasphemous, and 13-year-old Master Umar Farouk, who in the fight was accused of saying things derogatory against the Holy Prophet Muhammad. And this ignited frenzies of violence with crowds chanting for blood till the 2 were charged under Sharia penal law in northern Nigeria. Now, it seems civil society itself has become cannon fodder and does not realize how much power that it wields. Civil society wields far more power than it credits itself of, and this government knows it. Because of the agitations and demands for accountability by civil society in 2014, 2015 was what opened the way for the government, President Jonathan's government to give way to President Buhari's government. And that government has shut the door behind it by trying to gag civil society itself. They also realized that social media has increasingly become platforms for accountability, and civil society has been perceived as putting them in bad light to international community, even when they're clearly doing wrong. So in the past 10 years, we've had a lot of restrictive bills, governments trying to legalize barring dissent in the country. For example, we've had bills to regulate NGOs, bills to regulate the social media and the general media space, attacks on humanitarian actions, repression of activists, of protests, and of vocal voices across the country. Specifically, in June 2014, they came up with a bill to regulate the acceptance and utilization of financial and material contribution of donor agencies to voluntary organizations. In December 2016, they came up with the Non-Governmental Organizations Regulatory Commission bill, otherwise known as the NGO bill, which would mean government would take over civil society organizations and determine how they're controlled and what their activities are. In November 2019, they came up again with a hate speech bill, which pretty much just protects you speaking against politicians in any form. Again, in November 2019, as if that was not enough, then they tried and came up again with a Protection from Internet Falsehood and Other Manipulations bill. They've also attacked humanitarian actors, shut in offices in the Northeast, particularly of Mercy Corps, Action Against Hunger, raided a few times and shut UNICEF office, and profiling CSOs. The Department of State Services also profile CSOs and activists. My brother, Deji Adeyoju, has spoken about the number of times he's been arrested during peaceful protests, and everyone knows Deji is peaceful. But then Deji has just spoken of the iceberg of the litany of woes that civil society activists have had to suffer in the past 6 to 10 years in our country. You've had the weaponizing laws to attack civic voices. Speaking of people like Omoyele Sowore, John Ame, IG Wala, Jaffa, Stephen Kefas, Gloria Ballison, Audu Mekori, Chidi Odinkalu, Agba Dalingo, Abiri Jones, and I can go on, but then that will take me the entire evening on how many people this government has arrested, has sought to gag, and has arraigned before courts on frivolous claims just because they dared to dissent. Now, what are the current state of the bills that the government has tried to pass? The hate speech bill passed the first reading in the House of Reps. The Protection from the Internet Falsehood and Other Manipulation bills passed second reading to the Committee on Judicial and Human Rights and Legal Matters, and has had a public hearing, and we thought that would be the end, but then there have been moves recently to resurge the social media bill. We call it the social media bill. Now, the hate speech bill is likely to be jettisoned, but they're determined to definitely pass the Protection from Internet Falsehood and Other Manipulations bill, and also the Non-Governmental Organizations Regulatory Commission Establishment bill has been reincarnated as the Companies and Allied Matters Act, the new Companies and Allied Matters Act of 2020, which a number of civil society organizations are challenging or will also be challenging in court this year, and hopefully we will be able to get those portions that are draconian to our civic space abolished. Now, what's driving government to shrink the civic space and gag dissent? One, it is about legalizing systematic impunity, silencing dissent in any form, in any way they can, particularly through the laws. Also, that there is a cabal of people who have, in the past 22 years, sought to be perpetually in power and do not want to give way for democracy. That also our politicians are thin-skinned, and in particular our president. And we will recall that in 1984, when he was head of state in Nigeria, he had passed Decree 4, which also sought to gag freedom of speech and the civic space in the country, and he was quite successful. Another thing they've done is to put everything in the security bag. So the securitization of democracy has made our civic space and freedom of speech shrink considerably. So civil society doing? So civil society is composed of a potpourri of actors. Divided we fall, divided we still must protect our civic space, and that we're working together as much as possible, even on points where we dissent, to ensure that the civic space is open and that we're all able to work together. The politicians' narrative of civil society as being saboteurs and of being funded by foreign governments confuses a lot of people in the polity. And so in some instances, we've had constituency disconnect, and we're bridging the gap to ensure that we end that. We've also had fractured movements. Politicians will come in and try to buy off people, arrest people, or at least infuse conversations with fake news. But one of the most important things I want us to note about activists in Nigeria, about the media as well, is burnout is real and it's causing a lot of apathy as well, because people are starting to give in to think nothing will change, especially after the EndSars movement. So what's the role of the international community? Please be our not so silent partners. speak up. Our president has a hearing problem. And one of the things we know he hears is far-range noise. So when he hears things from the international community, he's more likely to act than when he hears them locally. We need in Nigeria to build cultures of rights and of democracy. You can help us to build that, not just laws, a culture of rights and democracy. We need to build the capacity of our young people. They form more than half of our entire population, but 70% of our population. They are also the future of our country. And they've demonstrated, particularly through the EndSars movement, that they've got that fire in them and that they can, if they're empowered to work on the civic space. Now, my brother Deji Adeyanju had said something, said, look, visa ban for erring politicians, their families, and their enablers. And I agree with it. I also agree that we must ensure an end to impunity and ensure that the international criminal courts are able to punish particularly the heads of our security forces and politicians who have enabled violence in our country, who continue to gag freedom of speech, who seek to gag the civic space, and who sit on the necks of civil society actors. We also need to name and shame them globally. And I hope it's not just governments that will join us in this, but also the media. I've exceeded my time. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Abby. I was enjoying your conversation. I didn't want to interrupt you. I'm afraid other members, other speakers will not have that opportunity. I will try to exercise some timekeeping so that we don't lose our audience. So thank you very much. I will do the summary at the end. What we are going to do next is a series of conversation on security issues. And as you are aware, so fundamental have this become. You may not know that just a few hours ago, they scooped on a school in Niger State and took away teachers and students. It's as bad as that. And a few days ago, there was a community outbreak of violence in my city of Ibadan, Shasha Market, in which the entire market was almost destroyed and people lost their lives. So both at the level of the streets and of government and of politicians, the real talk now is not even about economic development, but about security. And we have three speakers who will be leading our conversation on that. It's my pleasure to call on the Senior Legislative Associate for International Affairs at the Mennonite Central Committee, the distinguished Charles Kwelum, to begin this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. And thank you, Abby, for laying out that background as regards to this conversation. So I work with Mennonite Central Committee, and my name is Charles Kwelum. And just last year, MCC, which is Mennonite Central Committee, celebrated 100 years in the service of humanity through peace building, development, and humanitarian relief. And in peace building, we have been doing what we call the implementation of psychosocial support programming in conflict-affected contexts. So just to be very quick about this, I would say that synthesizing the remarks of Abby, you and I will now agree with me that human rights abuses in all forms are a violence against the individual, the family, the community, and the society. And so what it means is that physically and psychologically, this tears the individual apart, tears the community apart, and then at the same time wears them out. And also human rights abuses are crimes against humanity. They adversely affect our well-being in the form of trauma. And from the story of Deji, for example, and then so many others, which Abby has actually pointed out, you and I will now know that we are faced with a situation where those of us who are victims to human rights abuses are faced with trauma that tend to impact our well-being and development. And little wonder then, we wonder why interventions and approaches to combating such abuses tend to be frozen. It's because the human person needs to be transformed within from the pains that are internal, that have been incurred from the physical, in order to be able to relate and respond to those mechanisms and responses and interventions which you and I are actually suggesting. But however, just to let you know that interventions must be holistic and they must be trauma-informed and conflict-sensitive, so much so that they are grounded in community-based strategies to cope, heal, and recover. So mental health and psychosocial support have received less attention over the years. This is the fact. Most times when we talk about addressing human rights abuses, it's about development and DRL programming, and then so much so that there is a huge gap between connecting the response of the individual to those mechanisms that have been put in place. So when the body and psychological state of the person are wounded, are untreated, these gaps exist even in humanitarian and development interventions. And this is real. And that is the reason why oftentimes we are made to understand that psychological and social impacts may threaten peace, human rights as well, and development. And so that is to say that both the aggressor, the perpetrator, and the victim are faced with this gap for psychosocial interventions. And I must say that what is going on now is what we call cycle of violence. So we see repetitive situations of human rights violations, and then innocent citizens reacting again, you know. So we go on to protest peacefully. It's a cycle. It must continue. So how do we break the human rights abuses that have been perpetrated by the political actors, the security architecture, and then how do we break the negative reactions that tend to emerge? And so we are made to understand that trauma can be acute, simple, and then it becomes chronic if not treated, and then it becomes complex at the end of the day. And that is to say that things like extreme poverty that are already in existence, food insecurity, we have things like marginalization, political oppression and intimidation, and then we have things like destruction of social networks, destruction of community structures, trust, and increased gender-based violence as well, which are underlined within human rights abuses. We have the issues of drug addiction, for example, which might also come up. We have the issues of post-traumatic stress disorder alongside anxiety and depression. And so that is to say that for these human rights abuses, we see some effects that cannot be neglected. Things like social exclusion. Abby talked about jail terms. And then I know that Deji talked about frozen accounts. We have stigma. And then people are susceptible to violence. Aside from that, we have killings, maiming, displacement, loss of livelihoods. All these incur psychological pain on our brothers and sisters who are faced as victims to the perpetrators of human rights abuses. And then we have media apathy. Abby mentioned that. And then we have panic, we have fear, systematic targeting and intimidation. And I know that we are going to hear more from DJ Switch at the end of the day as regards to some of these psychological effects that tend to exhume, you know, as a result of these human rights abuses. And then I would say that large-scale unresolved trauma in communities has been shown to have a detrimental impact on attempts at conflict reduction, conflict resolution, and then peace. And then let me just quickly say this, that in our recommendations, we are hoping that the Congress and the US government, just like the way we have independent accounts on complex crisis fund and then DRL funds, in a way, it is good that they also establish what we call psychosocial support and mental health accounts. That will go a long way to aid agencies like USAID, and then also the State Department to mobilize and support organizations that are into psychosocial support programming in order to bring about the transformation of the victims, as well as even the aggressors, the perpetrators themselves. And then also there should be an increased understanding of trauma and resiliency in communities affected by violent conflicts. And so that's to say that Nigeria is a very unique country and context. And so we have to approach Nigeria from grass top, that is from the grassroots to the top. So, and that's to say that the community-based psychosocial trauma programs are needed in order to bring about a transformation. Then we are also asking the US government to increase robust humanitarian assistance to Nigeria. I know that it's not an issue of money, but this money will go a long way to aid international non-governmental organizations and local non-governmental organizations to undertake those programs that they know best how to do traditionally and contextually. Then there is a need for the US government to assist the Nigerian government in building the health system, so much so that at the end of the day, specialized services can be given to those of us who are victims of human rights abuses. I'll just stop it right there and then say that there is a need also for the US government to build the capacity of the media. I leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles. I'm very grateful for your timekeeping capabilities. I want to move on to our colleague from the Center for African Conflict and Development, Michael Nwakwa. And this is a belated apology to Biodun that I wrongly refer to as he as. She's my namesake. I'm also Biodun, by the way. I was born January 1st. That may have led to that small confusion. Apologies. So, Michael, it's your turn now, please. 5 minutes.
Michael, you're still muted.
Can you please unmute? We can't hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Can you hear now? Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Michael Nwakwa, and I lead the center here, Center for African Conflict and Development. This evening, I'll be spotlighting the Boko Haram, Nigeria's counterinsurgency practices, basically spotlighting the Boko Haram insurgency. As you know, since Nigeria has been fighting a deadly insurgency, the Boko Haram, Salafi jihadist group that seeks to replace Nigeria's secular political system with Sharia. So the Boko Haram insurgency has caused 4,000 deaths and led to displacement of millions. So within Nigeria, the insurgency has adversely affected economic livelihood and also added to food insecurity. The insurgency has ties into wider insecurities and organized crime in the country. Like Prof rightly mentioned, the kidnapping happened today. So it ties into including rampant kidnappings and banditry. But the impact of the insurgency far extends in neighboring countries of Chad, Cameroon, Niger, and globally through
Prof, I think we may have lost Michael.
I was just thinking we should give him a few seconds. Why waiting for Michael? Is back? while waiting for Michael, the issue of Boko Haram has been major, covering various countries, not just Nigeria, Niger, Chad, Cameroon. So in some nature, it's international. If you look at the map, I will stop talking once it comes. I'm just filling in for him. Michael, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Please continue.
Michael, maybe you drop the video to improve your bandwidth.
Okay, I'll just do that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I will just speak for 3 minutes on Boko Haram, just because of the audience and the symbolic importance of what we are doing as a briefing and this recording to be circulated subsequently. The issue of Boko Haram has been with us for a number of years.
Yeah.
Are you back again? Who manufactured it? Who sponsors it? And who allows it to fester? We must admit the following: money has been made as part of dealing with this issue. Not small money, a big amount of money. So, and whenever you find money being made between Boko Haram and those who are supposed to quash them, it raises a number of fundamental issues. Michael, anytime when you are in. So, just as other countries have done with all terrorist organizations, please continue.
Okay, so I was saying the impact of insurgency extends beyond Nigeria to include neighboring countries of Chad and globally through its alliance with transnational terrorist organizations, most notably ISIS since 2000. So the fight against Boko Haram, and particularly the use of force, is justifiable to a large extent. So we see that the militarized approach has yielded results. But this has come at a huge human cost and is definitely not the panacea to this protracted conflict. No matter of fact, it's safe to say that Nigerian military is most likely responsible for at least of the civilian casualties of Boko Haram. So in some cases, this is as a result of collateral damage, but in other cases, they are just deliberate acts, especially at the early stages of the insurgency, when members of the Northeast community were particularly young men were summarily executed as part of the military's collective punishment. So this is a policy that targeted those communities for their perceived support of the insurgents. So this then led to the establishment of the Civilian Joint Task Force. This is a vigilante group constituted who self-organize themselves to defend themselves from the double assault from the Nigerian military and from the insurgents. So since then, the task force has been integrated into Nigeria's counterterrorism operation and has been instrumental to military sources. But Civilian Joint Task Force itself has been responsible for its own violation of human rights. So, but although Nigeria maintains a predominantly militarized approach, there's also some soft power approach. So beginning from 2014, Nigeria set out this ambitious soft power approach that was lauded internationally. So these included the radicalization program of terrorists and detained suspects. And so by 2017, it adopted a policy framework and national action plan for preventing and countering violent extremism. So this policy stresses access to justice, human rights, rule of law, community engagement to prevent and combat Boko Haram extremism. So if I come to the foreign policy implications, so focusing on, so Nigeria is no doubt an important U.S. ally for several reasons. Nigeria assists with security, regional security, and also its size and its economic power in the continent is one that is of great benefit to the U.S. And by that reason, Nigeria has enjoyed counterterrorism support. It has enjoyed the Department of State Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program that provides funding, equipment, and training to countries fighting terrorism. But the relationship has been strained at other times. So during the Obama administration, the U.S. halted its military assistance to Nigeria as Nigeria failed the Leahy vetting, having been indicted of gross human rights violation fight against Boko Haram. Well, since the administration of Buhari and the administration of President Trump, the U.S. has since resumed its support of Nigeria's counterterrorism efforts. In 2017, it approved the sale of $593 million worth of military equipment to Nigeria. And also the U.S. alongside with the countries such as UK support Nigeria's deradicalization and rehabilitation program, which is known as Operation Safe Corridor. Well, the military has also used this program, to further perpetrate human rights. We hear cases of unlawful detention, cases of sexual abuse of victims, those that were for program. So the U.S. and all the international government may be inadvertently supporting Nigeria's human rights violation. So what is the sense? What I call to conclude is called the Nigerian political space needs to be demilitarized. The Nigerian political sphere is one that is highly militarized. So I would say Nigeria is still in the military government. Nigeria has not been in the civilian government. So that needs to be demilitarized. The military, even when we talk about the soft power, the military has the sole control of the soft power. Talking about the psychosocial stuff that Charles was just talking about. Talking about the rehabilitation of convicted, the military is in charge of this. In 2015, when I was opportune to interview some Boko Haram suspects in the prison, I did this alongside the military. So this was not supposed to be. There was an EU-funded project where that was civilian-led by experts. But when Buhari came into power, that was disbanded and the military was given total control. So I think the simple solution would be demilitarizing. And unfortunately, to conclude, I know the Nigerian police has not been any better, but we would need to reform that institution. That institution needs to take charge, because now what we see with Boko Haram is turning to pure greed. What's going on with banditry, and that is not a military. That's a simple law and order approach to this criminal approach. So that is what I'll say to just thank you very much.
Michael, we are very grateful for all the important points you have raised to solve one of the greatest security challenges in Nigerian history. Members of the audience, on his behalf, I apologize for those technical issues. Sometimes we can't just avoid them. I want to move on to our colleague who is from the Amnesty International, Adote Akwe, to please follow up on these security issues. Adote, welcome.
Thank you very much, Prof. First, I'd like to acknowledge the EndSars activist on the call for being such role models and for being so brave, and of course to thank Representative Green for being with us and for his commitment, and the fact that he's going to reintroduce his legislation in the 117th Congress has got to be a priority for anyone who wants to see Nigeria be the country that it has the right to be, that it has the capacity to be, and that the Nigerian people can make it. I'm going to talk very briefly about the violence in the Middle Belt, because this is the other big conflict in the country. For the international community, many people think about the Boko Haram conflict, but they sometimes are not aware that Nigeria's over 2 million internally displaced people have been created by conflict between communities in the Middle Belt states, and as a result of the government's failure to protect its people and do its job. When people talk about the Middle Belt violence, it's oversimplistically classified as a clash between farmers and herders, and by some communities even more dangerously as a clash between Muslims and Christians. While all of those are components of the conflict, there are also other drivers that make it dangerous to simplify it to either of those frameworks. Climate change has increased pressures on access to water and to grazing land. Tensions and displacement and food insecurity have, from the Boko Haram insurgency in the Northeast, have also contributed to where we are. But of course, the largest driver has been the failure of the federal government and the state governments to actually show the courage, the principle, and the leadership to do the right thing. Between 2016 and 2018, nearly 3,700 people were killed in the Middle Belt violence. This was between farmer communities and members of the herding communities that had lived together side by side for centuries. What also contributed to those large numbers was, of course, the response by the Nigerian security forces, where in some cases they did not do enough to protect, they did not do enough to stop attacks, and in other cases where there are clear signs that they actually were involved in some of the attacks. That kind of chaotic situation is not going to be solved easily, especially when leadership and trust and dialogue between communities has broken down to the point where former Nigerian police officials are telling communities to defend themselves, as opposed to relying on and expecting either the police or the military to do that job. The United States and the international community have a clear and important role in trying to support Nigeria's efforts to democratize and to build professional security forces, but also we all have a long-term vested interest in restoring peace, trust, rule of law, respect for human rights in the Middle Belt areas, just as we do in the other parts of the country. And it's important that the United States play this role in a constructive manner. The good news is that we now have an administration that is actually engaged in foreign policy, that has a vision of a role for itself in foreign policy, and has, let's be honest, a better assessment and value appreciation of Africa and of the need to engage with Africa as an equal and important partner for the United States. Congress has already been engaged in this issue in the Middle Belt. In fact, at the end of 2020, there were hearings in the House that looked at the violence in the Middle Belt. And we need that kind of interest to be echoed in the Senate, where we're also hoping to have legislation introduced. But most importantly, we need the Nigerian diaspora, whether it's in the United States or the United Kingdom, to continue this effort to hold its leaders accountable and to press for reform. I think the words from Abiodun at the beginning about creating a culture that respects rights, that expects government to be service-oriented, not to be in power for itself, is the fundamental change that we need to make. It cannot just be the brave people at the Lekki toll gates. It can't be the people who in the Nifar movement who have tried to take the Nigerian government to court over the disappearances of their husbands and sons. It has to be a whole of people type effort. And it also has to involve the global community. And I think one of the most inspiring things is that EndSars did become a global issue. It trended. people are aware of it. The moment about police reform and police accountability is a global challenge, and the Nigerian situation is no different. But we need to do the same kind of exposure with the middle belt violence. And we need to make sure that it's not treated as it's just climate, or it's not, or this is a war against Christians or a war against Muslims, but really that it has to be something that is prioritized by the Buhari administration. And I'll stop there so that my colleagues can follow. Thank you.
We're very grateful, extremely grateful. So we want to move to the issue of media and how, oh, excuse me, still on security. It's just confusing where the specialty of the speaker, Fauci Aminu, who works on multimedia and a brand curator. Fauci will be speaking to the issue of the impact of security issues on members of the Nigerian diaspora. Fauci Aminu, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Thank you guys for being here. I'm just going to speak really briefly. Like he said, my name is Fauci Aminu, and I am based in Houston, Texas. And the whole EndSars movement was very, very, I guess you can say, personal to me. A lot of people were asking me, oh, why are you doing this from the diaspora? You can't even, it's not, somebody literally specifically asked me, are you going to end SARS from America? And I found that really offensive, but then I couldn't be upset because you can't really be mad at people for not knowing better. And personally, I have been, embarrassed, harassed, and frustrated by the Nigerian police on multiple occasions. And it's just like a clear reminder that, this your accent, your America, whatever you have going on does not stop you from being assaulted by the Nigerian police. I feel like it's really important for everybody to put together all the differences that we have, tribe, religion, status, socioeconomic status, everything, and stand together, because it's that division that they're using to keep us oppressed and keep us divided and keep us down. I feel like it's really important for us to just stand as one and use our voices to continue to educate people. That's why it's so important for me. That's why at every opportunity, I always use my voice. I always educate people. The Nigerian police force is just terrible. Right now, somebody just sent me a message saying that the area boys or thugs are fighting in Lagos Island and the Nigerian police is nowhere to be found. But if it's to go and assault peaceful protesters, they will be there in hundred folds, and that's just unacceptable. There's no reason why, as a Nigerian, you should be scared to go anywhere in Nigeria because of the Nigerian police. Another thing that's really unacceptable is how the Nigerian government continues to, I guess you can even say, systematically keep the youth down and oppressed. For example, the recent cryptocurrency ban, just even literally everything that the youth do, the government finds a way to shut it down. And you can even use the EndSars movement, for example, when we were providing medical care. I'm pretty sure you can speak better on this, DJ Switch, but from the knowledge that we received from America, we were providing medical care, food, security, and all types of stability to the people who were at these protests. And they were literally stopping ambulances from entering the protest grounds. That's simply unacceptable and unfair. And I feel like I said, it's really important for us to put all our divisions aside and stand together as one and continue to educate ourselves and educate other people, because the thing that a lot of people are afraid of is what they do not know and what they do not understand. I've heard so many incorrect assumptions about people just in general based off of, like, it's also important for us to just not judge people based on appearance, what they look like, what they do, because at the end of the day, we're fighting for the same thing. That's just my little 2 cents on what's happening. If you're in the diaspora, use your voice, educate people, educate yourself. Don't say that your voice does not count because you're in America or you're in London or anywhere you are, your voice counts. Yes.
Thank you so much, Fauci, for that brilliant suggestion that in the final analysis, we are one. And that oneness is key. The last but not the least speaker, the famous DJ Switch, is a songwriter, is a musician, is an activist. Do 2 things for us, and I will give you 3 additional minutes. Tie together the main points that I've been talking about and tie them with your own conversation so that we have something holistic. One reason why you have to do that is that some people joined us late, so they miss some conversation. And that way, I don't have to do another summary because we want members of the audience to feed us with comments. Thank you.
Wow, Prof, thank you for this. You've given me a task. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is DJ Switch. I have to be honest, I was a bit disappointed when the congressman had to leave, but I'm hoping that, you know, the rest of this gets to him. So I could start by talking about what happened on the 20th of October, 2020, how the army came in and shot and injured and killed many peaceful protesters. And after the army left, the Nigerian police came and did the exact same thing. I could also tell you how government and appointed officials denied the events of the day. I'll be more than happy to provide you all with a detailed description of that later. But today, I really want to talk about consequences and also find a way to tie in everything like Prof said. The EndSars movement is as a result of abuse of power, human rights, abuse, police brutality, poverty, bad governance. And the Nigerian people have literally nowhere to turn to for help, even from our own justice system. Now, people might wonder, why are we bothering ourselves? You know, what are we trying to tell the Congress, American government? How is this their problem? So let me say this like this. The State Department, right, and the US Agency for International Development, that's USAID, allocated over $2 billion in the last 4 years in bilateral foreign assistance for Nigeria. These funds are meant to support programs focused on good governance, law enforcement, and the strengthening of our justice sector. Now, this does not include assistance provided in response to, say, like we're talking about the humanitarian crises in the Northeast, or funds administered by the Departments of Defense, Justice, Homeland Security, you name it. So the question is, where's the money? If these funds were used for the purpose with which it was allocated, then there would be no EndSars to start with. Where's the money? The American government may have received statistics from the Nigerian government on security improvements or police reform, poverty alleviation, and all that. In reality, the security situation in Nigeria has worsened and the poverty index has increased in the last 4 years. So that statistics for me would be 0. You know how the stigma that is attached to Nigeria as the 419 country or the Nigerian prince country. I'm just sorry to say that the biggest Nigerian prince is the Nigerian government, because they scam these other countries, these other governments. See, Nigeria is a great country, yeah, with resources. Unfortunately, it's squandered. They share it for favors. They use these resources in ways that do not help us at all. And I mean directly impact Nigerians on the ground, instead of using these resources to bring out the great in Nigeria. So I am tired. From this conversation alone, you can tell that many Nigerians are tired, we're exhausted, to know that the resources and funds from the American government, for example, are there, but it is used to enrich themselves and their families, privately support terrorist groups so they can keep taking your money. While the average Nigerian has to find ways to navigate the streets to avoid being shot at, harassed, or kidnapped by the police and these terrorists. You see, this and many more is what the EndSars movement is about. And of course, we all know the Nigerian government do not want the world to know what's really going on. And that is why it is no surprise that after the 20th of October, 2020, the Senate began a debate on social media regulation, like we were talking about earlier. In the old days, the government, they had control over media, newspapers, they controlled the narrative, but it's different today. This is why it is very important that we continue to speak up using what we have at our disposal that is an advantage to us, which is social media. They've also used people sworn to protect us against us because they have bought them all with your money. Accounts of protesters were tracked and frozen in a pandemic, mind you, but yet they seem completely incapable of tracking the accounts of terrorists in this country from, honestly, people I would not particularly call geniuses. So security, we know, is a pressing issue already. But the government is busy discussing things like bleaching creams and banning cryptocurrency. Like Fauzi was saying, it's almost as if the government wakes up in the morning and they look for the things that the youths are doing that benefit them and they try to take it away. They don't understand cryptocurrency. They can't exploit cryptocurrency, and so they ban cryptocurrency. Again, it's these issues and many more is why protesters are on the street. I want to cite a case, right? I want to make reference to a case. The IGP, Inspector General of Police, right, versus ANPP. I don't know if anybody is aware of this case, but it was led by our current president, General Buhari. Okay, it was in this case that he was protesting his right, his defense of his right, that a judge ruled that citizens did not need a police permit to protest. Yet on the 13th of February, 2021, EndSars protesters, about 40 of them, who were yet to even start the actual protest, were met with brute force by the Nigerian police. They were arrested, beaten, stripped, their face masks were taken off, and they were thrown in the back of a Black Maria. But some 2 days before that, there was a clash in Obalende, Lagos. And it took some time. Initially, the story was that they had shut the gates from people who were sending messages from Obalende. I don't know if you've ever heard of Koleka Putuma, but she said, and I quote, "You owe your dreams your courage. But it is a tough ask to be courageous in Nigeria. You may just be killed for it." I personally have had to go on the ground for my safety. And just before that, right, I'll tell you guys something. My mother asked me, "Why are you doing this?" I could tell she was crying on the phone. She said, "I don't want you to die." My mother is 76 years old. That is how long she has known the government to be like this. And I said, "I'm afraid, Mama, I am." But anyone that knows me knows I'm a very stubborn person. I don't know how to be silent in the face of bullying, oppression. I've just never been the sort. It's not who I am. But if someone as small as me can feel the weight of a government, imagine those who have no voice at all. And so, of course, many people who want to leave such a place, which is also a consequence for other countries who will now have to be dealing with migration issues and deporting Nigerians and all that. So I have a different approach, or rather, I would like to propose a different approach. We could talk all we want. We could have meetings all we want. And though they are good, we literally need to come up with a plan. What do we do? These insecurities that we have in the country, it benefits this government. They make money from these things. The insecurity works to their advantage, but not to ours. Prof, I don't know if you remember yesterday when you were talking to me about, young people taking office and all that. And I said to you that as much as we'd love to do that, Personally, someone like me, for example, I don't want to be a part of the godfatherism thing or whatever that thing is. And if you're not a part of that, forget it. These offices are sold literally to the highest bidder. So we need to come up with a plan. If not, we will talk about the Middle Belt, North, South, Niger. We'll talk about all these things all day, and it would just be conversation. So I'm urging you all today, especially Nigerians in the diaspora. I hope, again, members of Congress do see this. As a country, right, that is known to be one of the pioneers of human rights and democracy, you need to stop the money. Stop the money for now. Stop aiding the Nigerian government until accountability, respect for human rights, security, justice, democracy, all the things we, the EndSars movement, are fighting for are on the table. I know the consequence of speaking openly and honestly to you all today. But if we do not come together and if we do not get help for the Nigerian people, as a consequence, you would be indirectly helping the government to continue this abuse of power. Thank you, Prof. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you. So it is time now to throw it open. We have almost 30 minutes, I think, to throw it open to the public. We have some questions already sent, but I will privilege those who are attending to ask questions. The technical person may have to unmute whoever wants to ask questions so that the person can go ahead, and then we'll go. Please go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Engineer Ben Okugun. I looked towards this very meeting, and I'm glad I was able to make it. Well, I will take something from what DJ Switch said before she ended. What do we do? And that is why I actually tried to be here, because a lot has been said over the years, and it is time to begin to start looking for solutions. Because we already know that Nigeria has a long history of right abuses and misconduct. And because there is no deterrence, there is no justice, it continues to fester. And like the congressman said, there is only a limit to what the United States can do, the Congress or even the international communities can do, because they recognize the sovereignty of every nation. And that is why I'm not surprised that most of these human rights abuses, especially in developing countries, you see this cavalier approach from the international justice institutions. We have the UN Human Rights Commission. They are almost present in every part of the world. And even you see them in most capitals, in most countries where these abuses take place, and you hardly see any serious response from them. We have the African Union Human Rights Commission Council, we have the Human Rights Charter of African Union, but you don't hear anything from them, especially in rights abuses. So this, even international criminal courts, they also, and I don't know why it takes so long for these international bodies to act when there are abuses, because they are set up for such purposes. That was one of the questions I asked earlier. Why it takes so long for them to respond? Because in these modern times, social media age, it is very easy to prove abuses. You can even see them real time. You can see them live, like the EndSars extradition.
I'm sorry, engineer. We're gonna have to wrap up the question because the link is going to be end at 12:30. Sorry about that.
Is it okay if I just quickly jump in and just say something to engineer? I have spoken to the prosecutor office at the International Criminal Court. I've actually been following up with that, and also with Amnesty, who's also helping with that. I know that we're sort of wrapping up, but I just want you to know, just have it at the back of your mind. We're all doing everything that we can do. We all need to just continue doing what we can do. Accountability is number one, because if that doesn't happen, every other thing we're doing is pointless, because they'll keep getting away with it.
Okay, the organizers said we have to wrap up. I was looking at my own time, which is 11:29 here. Their own time is 12. It's 12:29. So I thought we have more time. Well, I need to thank all of you for your participation. And
may I ask a quick question, please?
Please go ahead.
Good evening or good morning. I'm not quite sure. Let me put this on. I would put my video on, but I don't know how to right now. My name is Falaki Oluwofoyeku, and I have a question as a Nigerian in diaspora. I know that I need specific instructions. I've spoken to a few people that are on the panel, but I need specific instructions about how to help. It's been quite a task trying to figure that out, from trying to reach out to folks on ground during the initial protests and at Capitol Gate up until now. I have a platform that I'm able to use, and I need specific instructions about how exactly and what is the most effective way to effect change in Nigeria.
Yes, please.
I'd like to try and answer very quickly, Falaki. One, just like DJ Switch said, we need to highlight and press for a freeze on assistance until there's accountability, and especially the security assistance. Second, we need to get the Al-Green bill introduced and passed, because that's the platform around which you do education. It also sets the principles that the EndSars and other human rights groups in Nigeria have been fighting for, and makes it official US policy and language. So we need to get that bill introduced in both the House and the Senate, and we need to get it passed.
Third, and what does that mean for me specifically?
For you,
as a
as an influencer, Falaki, for you, you should basically say, any of my fans need to get in touch with their member of Congress and ask them to support the Green resolution. Get in touch with Al Green's office and ask him, how do I sign on? Second, and then the other one is something that the Nigeria Working Group is starting, which is to try to get city councils around the country to pass similar types of resolutions. Because we've learned that if you don't put pressure on Congress from their own constituents, they won't move. And we need to get solidarity, not only at the city level, but also that's where a lot of the discussions on police reform are happening. And that is where the EndSars campaign has the most power to pull in more people, because the principles are the same, the rights are the same, and the problems are the same. They're just in different geographic locations. That's where we start.
I just remember that I didn't also wrap up something. Thank you so much, Falaki. I hope you're able to do that. Mr. Charles, you said something about mental health. I just want to say this, hopefully everybody can get it. Nigeria as a whole is a mental health challenge. Like, the country can give somebody serious sickness, right? I just want to encourage everyone to lean on to your brothers, your sisters, your neighbors, lean on to people with like minds. You have to start with like minds. You can't change the minds of people who are actively against you. So lean onto those people, speak to them. If you need some time off, take it, okay? I was messed up for over a month. My job, everything I have is literally gone. My mom literally had to leave. People were coming to my house. And I don't talk about this on social media because I know social media. There'll be somebody who have an opposing view in my own life, like they were there. So what's the point? So lean on yourself, your strength, your family, friends, and people that with like minds. The more we come together, the more we begin to make people see what we're trying to fight for, see the vision. But we must stick together. It's very important.
Well, I have to stop. I'm sorry, because the organizers want us to stop. But there's a promise, which is that we're going to repeat this. And I will appeal to all our speakers to let us reassemble and draw more people from Nigeria. We can draw almost 2,000 people to this conversation. And I will be in conversation with the Nigerian group for us to repeat this. And at that time, you all can answer your questions. Let me make my closing remarks. To the state, the government, the police, they must know and bear in mind that a critic is a citizen, first and foremost. Is that critic, he or she loves his country, our country? Because if you don't love a place, you don't devote all your energy to look for solutions to the place and make the place better. So the critics are doing the right thing. Is a state that is not doing the right thing. Second, for those of us who have studied the Nigerian police, from its very beginning, it was never created for its citizens. It was created to advance a domination project. For those of us who have been tabularizing the number of police, Nigerian people, millions of them, are law-abiding. They don't cause trouble. They don't even engage in corruption. How many police do you see in the city of Ibadan, one of the biggest in West Africa? How many police are there? They use more police to protect the Oga people. The wife of a senator, of a big man, can send the police on an errand to the market to go and buy yam. All those big houses, they have been policed. So how many police are actually in Ajegunle, in Mushi, protecting people? So the police is part of the apparatus of exploitation and domination, protecting citizens. And so also is the army. Remember very clearly, the colonial army was not created for Nigerians. If you count the number of people that the Nigerian army has killed, it has killed more Nigerians than non-Nigerians. So you find all the security apparatus that are actually working against the people, not for the people. And as one of you said, this culture has to change. It's not about rethinking, it's about a revolutionary process in which citizens have to rise up. And on that rise up, the EndSars movement will be counted as one of the best things that have happened to the country after its independence. Thank you, the Nigerian group. Thank you. We will summarize this conversation and send it to Al-Green and to my listeners, to members of the audience. Do please contact the congressman. Once the draft is ready, with their permission, we should post it for people to make comments, and please don't despair. Until we meet again, I thank all of you for this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. We appreciate you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Blessings and stay safe.
Thank you. I enjoyed this. Let's have it another time.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you, all the speakers.
Bye. Bye, guys.